I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. What is personhood? Well, Mississippi voters are about to decide what their state constitution has to say about it. We'll hear from an advocate. Plus, Net's Faith Film Festival rolls up the screen in the theater and goes underground this weekend.
It's very difficult to find an alternative to what's out there in the world, and Catholic Underground provides it.
And Saint Damien of Molochai's relic comes to Brooklyn. And the first stop was St. James Cathedral, where the relic of the revered priest was welcomed.
It's just another thing to help us realize how much God loves us and is willing to help people, especially now that we're weary and are lonely. So I was very happy that I got here to see that.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Well, most of the election news these days is focused on the 2012 presidential race, but tomorrow is, in fact, Election Day 2011. And while it may be an off year, at least one race is grabbing a lot of national attention. Mississippi voters will head to the polls to vote on what has become known as a personhood amendment. If they approve it, the measure would define fertilized eggs as people, fertilized human eggs as people. Now, it's aimed at reducing the number of abortions, and some say it could bring an end to abortion altogether in Mississippi. But not everyone in the pro-life movement is exactly on board with this, saying that there could be some unintended consequences. Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour expressed some concerns last week over the language of the measure that defined a person as every human being from the moment of fertilization, cloning, or the functional equivalent thereof. Now, despite those reservations, Barbour did ultimately vote for the bill.
I struggled with it. I had some concerns about it, have some concerns about it. But I think all in all, I believe life begins at conception. So I think the right thing to do is to vote for it, which is what I did this afternoon.
So what will this personhood amendment really do? Well, for more on that, I'm joined now on the phone by Gualberto Garcia Jones. He's a legal analyst with the group Personhood USA. Mr. Jones, thanks so much for taking some time for us. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
Well, first of all, I'll just ask you that question simply. What will this amendment or what does it say, and what will it do in Mississippi?
Well, it's an amendment to the Mississippi Bill of Rights, and it's just like freedom of speech or freedom of the press. It's a foundational amendment, but it's not a regulation. It doesn't have criminal penalties. What it does do is it says that all human beings should be considered persons, and their rights should be safeguarded in the Constitution of Mississippi from the beginning of their development, which happens to be fertilization, till the end of their life.
Now, of course, a lot of people on the other side of the issue, and a lot of pro-lifers as well, as you just heard from Governor Haley Barbour there with his concerns about this, although he did ultimately vote in favor of it. You know, they're saying that there could be some unintended consequences in this. Some of those include outlawing of common forms of birth control or, you know, in vitro fertilization and things like that. Are those legitimate concerns in your view? Absolutely
not. The campaign that's promoting the no vote is funded 100% by Planned Parenthood and the ACLU, and basically their goal is to keep abortion on demand legal. And so we see that for any type of pro-life law that goes up, whether it's something as simple as a 24-hour waiting period to an ultrasound, they say will have unintended consequences and will put doctors and women in peril. And so this is really just the same playbook. And I think if you read the language of the amendment, it's very, very simple. It's just saying it's affirming life, and it certainly would not do what they're saying.
All right. Well, but if you define you know, a person as beginning at the moment of fertilization, does that not then make I guess even some common forms of birth control, or even IVF, in which, you know, some fertilized eggs are then destroyed? Does that not make that in essence murder?
No, it wouldn't. You know, with IVF, it would basically make it so that these children that are so wanted by their parents wouldn't be intentionally destroyed, that's for sure. And then with birth control, it would basically redefine birth control so that, you know, there is legitimate forms of birth control, but an illegitimate form would be killing the child before he's born as a form of controlling birth. And I think that's a pretty common sense approach. I don't think that's radical at all. We shouldn't have the intentional killing of a child as a form of birth control.
Well, of course, something that is that has stirred up this much controversy as it has, and gotten national attention in an off-year election cycle, is bound to wind up, I would imagine, at least in court at some point, maybe sooner than later. What do you think that the other side is going to say about that if they do bring that before a court, and what would the defense be?
Right. I think they will bring a constitutional challenge to try to uphold Roe versus Wade, which basically is the law of the land and says that abortion is legal during all 9 months. And so they'll bring that in, I imagine, within weeks. I've actually heard some of their attorneys on national television already saying they're ready to go. So I think they'll argue that, and we'll argue that it's within the state's purview to protect persons within their borders as full human beings with rights.
And what is the status of any other efforts going on with Personhood USA in other states? Are there other measures like this that are getting ready to come on the ballot in other places?
Yeah, we have several other states. Some of them are circulating petitions right now, such as Florida, Ohio, California, Colorado's about to start. And then there are others that will definitely get going as soon as Mississippi's over, like Arkansas. Maybe North Dakota, Montana's already circulating. So this is a widespread movement.
Polls are showing it's close there in Mississippi. If it does not pass, what are the next steps there in Mississippi itself?
Well, the legislature is very, very supportive. We have the current governor, the both Democrat and Republican, white and black candidates supporting this, and so we're confident that if it doesn't pass, and we are very hopeful that it will pass, the legislature will then, implement some legislation to basically do the same thing that this amendment would have done, and hopefully they won't have to battle with the outright lies that Planned Parenthood is putting out there.
All right, Gualberto Garcia-Jones, legal analyst with Personhood USA. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to talk to us. We really appreciate it, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks. Well, there's more currents ahead. Coming up, we'll take a closer look at the issue that's at the heart of this amendment, fertilization. Stay with us. Welcome back. As all eyes turn to Mississippi in anticipation of a vote tomorrow on that state's so-called personhood amendment, we want to take a look at what the Catholic Church has to say about not only the measure, but its potential consequences and the issues surrounding it. Now, if voters approve Amendment 26, a person would be defined as, quote, every human being from the moment of fertilization, cloning, or the functional equivalent thereof. Now, the language has caused some concern, even from pro-life advocates, because it includes fertilization by means other than natural conception. Well, for a Catholic understanding on what conception is, I'm joined now on the phone by Monsignor Michael Curran. Monsignor Curran has previously taught moral theology at Immaculate Conception Seminary in Huntington, Long Island. He was also director of admissions at the studies at the Pontifical North American College in Rome. Monsignor, thanks so much for taking a little bit of time for us. Really appreciate it.
Matt, thank you for asking me. Happy to do so. Well,
first of all, here, the people behind the personhood amendment in Mississippi say that they want life defined as beginning at fertilization, but the pro-life message, at least I guess maybe the mainstream pro-life message, definitely the message of the church has been that life begins at conception. So there might be some confusion there. Is there a difference, at least morally speaking, between those two?
I don't think so, Matt. I think that when we speak of especially in light of Evangelium Vitae and the entire magisterium of Blessed John Paul II about the culture of life, that we understand human life as beginning at conception and continuing all the way up to natural death. I suppose the language in the Mississippi proposal is using fertilization because they want precisely to encompass those other areas or those other means, you might say, of conception, both in vitro and other, you might say, technical means. So I think they're trying to be as broad as possible. But we would say that when in human life, when a sperm and egg come together, that we have a new human life that is to be respected as a person made in the image and likeness of God, even though understanding, of course, that personhood develops as it does in every human life.
Right. Now, of course, we wouldn't want or ask you to say, any sort of official statement of the church here or anything like that. But do you think, knowing what you know about this personhood amendment in Mississippi and similar efforts that have taken place in other states, Colorado had one particular effort on the ballot before as well, and I think there are petitions started in other states, as we heard earlier in the show. Do you think that a Catholic could vote for an amendment or a measure like this in good conscience?
Well, I think that's basically as I understand it, what the bishops of Mississippi have kind of proposed, unless I'm misunderstanding them, that they put it before the prudential judgment of each voter. I think the bishops of Mississippi have certainly applaud any effort to preserve the sanctity of life, but I think perhaps they have some reservations, as other pro-life groups have reservations about the language of the proposal, as well as maybe trying to concentrate their efforts more on something on the federal level that will ultimately overturn abortion as being provided for, in the Constitution. But I think it is put before the judgment of each voter, each Catholic voter. And on one hand, as I see it at least, certainly, we'd applaud any effort to preserve and to promote, you might say, the sanctity of life, and especially understanding the sanctity of life beginning with conception. But on the other hand, I guess there's some reservations about how encompassing it is. Maybe it's trying to do too much at one time, and so I think that there's been kind of mixed reviews. But I don't think anybody's losing sight of the larger picture, that even if they have reservations about this particular proposal, or as also the one in Colorado that was previously discussed, is in no way diminishing or watering down the teaching of the Church with regards to the sanctity of life, but wondering whether on a you might say strategic basis this is the best way to proceed.
Sure, and whether or not this passes, do you think that it's at least maybe a good thing that this has sort of changed the political discussion for at least a moment, where we're talking about these issues instead of only focusing on economic issues or Occupy Wall Street or the Tea Party or any of that, any of those other things?
Good point, Matt. I think it is. I think from our perspective, the beginning of all human rights is the right to life, and the recognizing the dignity of life at any stage depends on our recognizing it at its most early and most vulnerable stage, both at the beginning of life and also at the end of life. So I do think there's a certain refreshing quality to discussing really the basic issues on at least for a while, and hopefully we can keep life issues towards the center as time goes on.
All right. Well, Monsignor Michael Curran, thanks so much for taking a few moments to talk to us, and all the best with your upcoming surgery as well. Our prayers go with you for that. Thanks, Monsignor. Really
Thanks so much,
appreciate
Matt.
it. All right.
Take care.
Well, there's more currents coming up. Pope Benedict and bishops are speaking out against anti-Christian violence. We'll have that and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in just a bit, a revered saint visits Brooklyn in the form of a sacred relic. First, though, let's have a look at the day's headlines. A brutal scene from Nigeria, where 2 women were killed and a dozen more injured when gunmen opened fire at a Catholic church in the central part of the country. Christian Solidarity Worldwide reports the gunmen entered the church and attacked a group consisting mainly of women and children. Now, in his Sunday Angelus prayer, Pope Benedict called for an end to the violence.
Con apprensione I tragici episodi che si sono verificati nei giorni scorsi in Nigeria, e mentre prego per le vittime, invito a porre fine ad ogni violenza che non risolve I problemi, ma li accresce, seminando odio e divisione anche fra I credenti.
Well, the church attack is just one in a string of violent incidents in Nigeria. Demonstrators took to the streets to protest the apparent inaction by security forces following the most recent attack. Well, meantime, an Indian bishop is speaking out against what he says is the apparent indifference of local authorities to anti-Christian violence in his country. The Archbishop of Bangalore sent a letter to his region's chief minister following the vandalization of a Catholic church last week. The Archbishop says Hindu mobs have attacked 36 churches in the region since September of 2008. He says people are living in constant fear of being attacked. Elsewhere, a bishop on the Ivory Coast says there is a climate of generalized insecurity in his nation following recent violence near the border of Liberia. And the Bishop of Man tells the Vatican news agency Fides that it's not clear who is causing the violence, but he says guns are easily obtainable. Earlier this year, rebel forces clashed with supporters of the country's previous president, Laurent Gbagbo, who was arrested after losing the election but refusing to leave office. Well, a bishop in Honduras wants to run for president of his country, and now he has resigned. Bishop Luis Santos Vieda stepped down after reaching the mandatory retirement age of 75. Vieda says he had been asked to run for president of Honduras in the 1990s and then again in 2009, but declined. Last month, he told Catholic News Service he wants to run for office as a candidate for his country's Liberal Party. Vieda said he would ask Pope Benedict's permission to run. American bishops, meanwhile, have begun what's known as their ad limina visits with Pope Benedict. The bishops of 5 New England states arrived in Rome last week to meet with the pontiff. The visits are intended to give the Pope reports on the status of dioceses around the world. For the first time, Benedict will not be meeting with bishops one-on-one, but will meet with between 7 and 10 bishops at a time. The advisor to the U.S. Bishops' Conference who linked homosexuality with Satan has resigned. Daniel Avila had been a policy advisor to the Bishops' Subcommittee for the Promotion and Defense of Marriage since June. In a column printed in the Archdiocese of Boston's newspaper, The Pilot, Avila wrote that there was, quote, credible basis, he said, for a spiritual explanation for homosexuality that indicts the devil. Now, Avila apologized for that column, and The Pilot issued its own apology for printing it. Forbes magazine has released its list of the 100 most powerful people, with Pope Benedict at number 7. The Pope dropped 2 spots from a year ago. Number 1 on this year's list is President Obama, followed by Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, Chinese President Hu Jintao, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Microsoft co-chairman Bill Gates, and Saudi King Abdullah. Benedict came in ahead of Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke and Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. Well, World Youth Day 2013 may be almost 2 years away, but there's already music in the air. Rome Reports has that story.
Bishops of Brazil and several music producers have released a CD in preparation for World Youth Day 2013 in Rio de Janeiro. The album is called In My Heart, I Carry a Cross, and has 13 songs that have spiritual themes. The song Nova Geracao gives the CD its title. It's performed by the priest, composer, and singer Father Zazino. The collection has musical styles from different parts of Brazil. It includes classics like samba and bossa nova, showcased by 80 different musicians. The CD is planned to be followed by 2 others. The second will have 12 songs that help shape the history of World Youth Days. And the third will have unreleased tracks for World Youth Day 2013 in Rio de Janeiro.
And that's own Faith Film Festival went underground this past weekend. Our producers here took the show on the road to Catholic Underground in the city.
Don't make me. This is a church. We should go in and pay respect.
This started here at the Catholic Underground because at last year's screening, where we presented some of the best films for the second season, some of the Franciscan friars, they attended the event and they thought it would be a great idea to have Faith Film Festival at the Catholic Underground.
So that TV I started the Faith Film Festival. Films that depict something about the relationship between men and God, between God and us.
The people who are coming here are watching 4 different films, and hopefully what they'll get is an understanding that faith comes to different people in different ways. Each of these films is very different, and hopefully they'll understand that everyone can be touched in a different way from a different film, from a different person, and a different story.
I've never had a problem raising my hand in school. In the final seconds of the game, or even that time I was bumped in the alley.
I really believe in what's going on here. From the adoration to the art to the media that's exposed here. It's just really amazing because I feel that we really do need to change our culture. So being a young Catholic myself, it's very difficult to find an alternative to what's out there in the world, and Catholic Underground provides it.
I thought they were awesome. We were up in the upper church for confession for the first part, but we came down and caught most of the rest of it, and it just such touching messages that really make us stop and think about the meaning of life, and really the scriptures coming alive too. So that was great, thank you.
What makes Faith Film Festival interesting, in my opinion, is that I noticed that the filmmakers that make these films, they're really not interested in becoming famous or rich. Their main interest is to spread the message, their message of faith, or a message of inspiring, of giving hope, and just a positive message. And it's like a different type of filmmaker, different type of artist, and that's, I think, what really makes this Faith Film Festival different.
Stay with us, there's more currents ahead. Coming up, the Diocese of Brooklyn says aloha to the patron saint of Hawaii, who came in the form of a cherished relic.
It gives you inspiration to carry on no matter what your situation is, and he just did that. Even when known that he had leprosy, he kept going.
Well, finally tonight, he was a saint who went where not many were willing to go. Known as Father Damien, this native of Belgium was an ordained priest in what was then the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1864. Almost 10 years later, he risked his life by volunteering to travel to the island of Molokai to minister to lepers. Damien eventually caught leprosy and died himself at the age of 49. Well, Pope Benedict declared him a saint in October of 2009. And this past weekend, a piece of Saint Damien was here in Brooklyn, literally. It was a relic, a piece of bone from his foot, and it was on display at St. James Cathedral downtown.
Tonight we are in the company of Damien of Molokai. His mortal remains remind us of the man he was and the sacrifices he made. It's a wonderful thing to have the relics of this saintly man, famous for his love of the truly poor, the lepers of Molokai.
You've come here to pray and to be in touch with Father Damien in this very spiritual and powerful way.
Father Rodin has a special devotion to Saint Damien, and he actually went to Honolulu to pick up the relics and bring them back.
I pray that that God will bless you for being here, that Damien will accompany you in your own journeys, your own service, your own struggles. In 1863, leprosy was an epidemic in Hawaii, and people were quite afraid. There was no cure. They didn't understand the disease. Hawaii at that time banished the people to a peninsula off the island of Molokai called Kalapapa. Father Damien volunteered to go there. He built houses for the people. He nursed them. He lived with them. He loved them. Doing that, he caught the disease, and he died of leprosy in 1889. So he was there for 16 years.
We've come here to venerate his relics. Some might say, why this fascination? And yet, we remember from the early days of the church that the Christians in the catacombs celebrated the Eucharist on the tombs of the martyrs and saints. Most churches do have the relics of the saints under the altar, reminding us of the early days of the church, where we remember those who have died because they are our heroes, our witnesses, the ones we want to imitate.
The relic is a bone from his left foot. And that's significant because Father Damien discovered he had leprosy when he put his left foot in the boiling water and felt nothing, which was a sign that he had the disease.
I've always had very great respect for him and very great love for him, so I was very anxious to come this evening.
It gives you inspiration to carry on no matter what your situation is, and he just did that. Even when known that he had leprosy, he kept going.
It brought me to tears. Couldn't explain why, but it just did. I thought of his life and what he did to serve mankind and how close he was to God, and it just really inspired me.
Hopefully, some way in our own lives, we can reflect that love of God and neighbor which he had, and that we too can find the happiness he had in serving others without counting the cost.
All right, well, that is it for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, a beloved Brooklyn bishop celebrates a big anniversary. Until then, though, be sure and visit us online at currentsny.net. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching and have a great night.